llegó Liberty Revolt, el programa donde compartimos estrategias para enfrentar la guerra cultural en nuestra sociedad y analizamos la política y sus ramificaciones. Únase a nosotros para discutir las ideas filosóficas que nos impactan día a día. Gracias por sintonizar el programa de Bucky Dillon.
What's up, guys? And we're live. How you guys doing?
Doing pretty good.
Doing awesome. How are you?
Yeah. So thanks everyone for hanging out in the live stream. My name is Bucky Dillon, and I will be the host of this Liberty Revolt broadcast brought to you by 1360 KHNC Studios. And I'm sitting here today with a couple of new friends of mine and co-patriots, I can proudly announce.
Yeah.
These are the founders of the Youth Federalist Initiative. So why don't you guys introduce yourself and then introduce what it is that you guys do.
Absolutely. Hey, my name is Kavika Berthollet. I am the vice chairman for the Adams County Republican Party. I'm also pretty active and engaged as an educator and in some other facets, which you'll find out through the Youth Federalist Initiative. We also have another person in our project that is not here today. His name's Austin Rollison. He owns Rollison Consulting, and he was also one of the three co-founders for the Youth Federalist Initiative, which created the Red Rift.
Okay, and my name is Evan Underwood. Ways I'm involved politically, first and foremost is I'm also in the Adams County Republicans. I'm the chairman for House District 34 up in Adams County. I'm serving under Kavika as the vice chairman for the county. And I'm also a co-founder of the Youth Federalist Initiative. Kavika and I do two different things for it, but we're still all in on the same project. And we're glad to be here. We're glad to be on the radio, and we're glad that we have we're glad that you, Bucky, have given us a platform to help us spread the word and promote what we're doing.
Right on. So what exactly is the Youth Federalist Initiative?
Yeah, I can go if you want.
Mm-hmm.
So the Youth Federalist Initiative, we really have to explain what it is by starting out with the main problem that we're trying to address. It started in 2019 between me, Kavika, and Austin, and we're all members of the Adams County Republicans. And really what we see with the Adams County Republicans, which is a problem with many counties across the state in Colorado, is that Republicans are losing because there just isn't good recruitments, and there isn't a good way where like every county can reliably get young volunteers, young people who know about the civic engagement process, young people who are influenced by conservative ideas, and young people who are willing to step up, be a leader in their county party, and most importantly, step up and be a candidate for a political office. So the Youth Federalist Initiative seeks to remedy that by just creating a streamlined process where young people can get those resources and just be told exactly, what to do to be successful in politics. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, we just coach young people how to be a good candidate, how to be a good campaign manager, how to be actively involved with helping candidates in your county parties. So we really just try and get the most people involved in that, and we directly help the county parties in that way. And we're doing this with the hopes of, creating this political machine that's primarily local, and creating this machine that just helps the county parties get the most quality people as possible. And one quick note, that isn't to say that if you're older, like if you're not a millennial, you're anything older, for example, that isn't to say that you still can't participate and help us. We have a candidate training right now. Anyone's welcome regardless of age. And we welcome anyone's help and participation.
Yeah. Some other things that we do just outside of candidate training is to teach young people how to civically engage. Most of them don't even know what their rights are. And so we want to go ahead and remedy that issue. Most of the adults that we talk to can't even give us the 5 guaranteed rights in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Do you know them?
What are those?
Well, I'm going to put you on the hook right now. Let's go.
So you have the right of assembly.
Okay.
Mhm.
You have the right to own and bear arms.
No, that's
That-
Amendment 2.
We're talking about the First Amendment.
First Amendment only.
Yeah, there's 5 clauses in the First Amendment.
Yep.
Well, I heard Kurt. I hope Kurt isn't watching. The right to assembly, the
Yep.
right to a free press,
Yep.
religious practice.
Oh, that's assembly.
Oh, really?
hmm
Freedom of religion is as a part of assembly.
Freedom of religion is the assembly clause.
Oh well, see, there's a reason I have trouble. So why don't you tell me what I'm getting wrong?
Absolutely. So you got the freedom of assembly, or the right to practice your religion freely, and then you have freedom of speech. You can say what you want as long as it's there, and then you have your freedom of the press. You have the freedom to peaceably protest. And then you have the final one, which is petition for the
Redress of grievances.
And so,
Now, I wouldn't feel too bad about yourself, Bucky, because Amy Coney Barrett couldn't even name them when put on the spots.
Wow.
yeah. Most people can't name that are adults even.
All right, so let's do those again one more time slowly.
So you have your freedom of religion or assembly.
Take notes.
Your second freedom is your freedom of speech. That's the one that everybody knows within the First Amendment because it's most publicized in schools. And there's a reason for that. Okay. The third one is your freedom of the press. And then you have the freedom to peaceably protest. That's the fourth one. And then the fifth clause is the freedom to petition the government for a redress of grievances, which is absolutely beautiful. I love that one. And that's one of the ones that's oftentimes attacked out of the First Amendment.
Yeah, basically
That one in
petitions.
religion. Mm-hmm. And with petitions, also recalls fall within those.
Yep.
Within those guidelines.
Boom. So we have the freedom of religion / assembly,
Yep.
freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, freedom to peaceably protest,
hmm
and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
There you
Yep.
go. Yeah, so those are beautiful. I absolutely love those first 5. And I can tell you right now, there's a pretty interesting fight going on in Westminster, for example.
hmm
And what's happened is the people have signed a petition. They've gone forward with the percentage of the votes that they needed in order to recall multiple of the sitting councilors and the mayor, Mayor Atchison, and you had John Voles and Anita Seitz.
Yep.
All were brought back, recalled.
Well, one of them technically was.
One of them wound up getting it. And then what the mayor did, Herb Atchison, is he resigned his position, which basically nullified his recall. And then Anita Seitz was moved up because she was the mayor pro tem into the mayor position, which means that she was spared
No,
the
mayor
recall.
pro tem just means that you're like temporary filling the spot.
Well, it's more so like the deputy mayor,
Yeah.
the equivalent to what the vice president is to the president's.
Mhm.
But I mean, that is one of the duties of the mayor pro tem.
Yeah.
If the mayor, for whatever reason, resigns like Herb Atchison did, then the mayor pro tem's right there to take his place.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Super simple,
Yeah.
though.
But basically, 2 of those recalled people avoided a recall by simply resigning. One of them is currently actually being recalled.
So what government representatives can you recall? Can you recall a city council member?
And
Yes.
name an elected official.
Any elected official?
You can get rid of them all if they're elected.
Well, now I believe there are some restrictions for federal representatives.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to recall the mayor and a couple city council members of Fort Collins, I can initiate that
Yes.
process.
Yes, you can.
And how would I go about initiating that process?
You're going to have to go to your city clerk and inquire about a recall petition. And every city has different procedures and standards, so I can't speak universally. So my best advice is just go to the city clerk and see what he has to say.
Mhm.
But I will say that generally, recalling an elected official is fairly hard. Because normally what a city does is, say you go to the city clerk, they have you do their various administrative procedures to get a petition active. They normally set a bar for the minimum amount of signatures that you need to recall somebody, and that bar is normally
Pretty high.
well, it's high. Like they take the total amount of people who voted in the race of the official being recalled, and then say you need at least 30% of those active voters signing the recall petition.
Yeah.
And once you get those 30%, it's rarely ever a guarantee that the recall petition will go through, because what the city clerk normally does is they go through and invalidate a ton of signatures. Because they have very specific standards for what constitutes a valid signature and what constitutes a valid form being filled out.
Interesting.
So, I mean, for example, nicknames are the most common reason signatures are thrown out. So say, I don't know, my full name is like Michael Scott, but I put Mike Scott. Right.
Okay.
That's invalid. Other reasons
so if
is
somebody were to say recall Bucky Dillon, they would have a hard time.
Well,
yeah,
right.
because that's not your real name.
Yeah,
Is
they
it?
have to. Put
Is
their
it?
actual-
Isn't it though?
Is it?
Audience. Is it though?
Is it though?
Robert Stanley says this would include elected sheriffs? ?
Yeah.
Again, you have to go through the process though, and that can be a headache because you also have to prove that these people are constituents that would have been able to vote, which means their address has to fall within that person's elected area. So if you're in a city council area that's broken into wards, for example, the people have to live within that ward.
Yeah.
And so you have to be in those guidelines. Everything has to match.
Yeah,
So
and that's all
the
on you
voter
as a
registration
and that's all on you
everything.
as a
So I
recall
can't go
organization.
recall the city council for District 3 sitting city council member by going to District 4 and collecting a bunch of signatures.
Nope.
It has to be that
It
person's
has to be that
constituency.
So that's one thing that does make it difficult, because 99% of people, if you walk up to someone and say, "Hey, what ward are you in for your city council?" Like they won't be able to tell you. They have no clue. So that's one thing that recall organizations have to get over as a boundary, and that's what they really have to try and educate the voters on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Guys, so if you are watching this live stream right now and you have questions, these two are experts in how political campaigns are run, how the political process works, how elected seats operate, and how to fight back against elected officials. Correct?
Yes.
Yep, that's stuff we do for fun.
So
For fun, yeah. Well,
This is so
sometimes we
weird.
get paid.
Sometimes we get paid.
Hey, if you want to pay me, then
yeah.
I'm always looking for more people.
So Evan, you're actually a campaign manager.
So I don't do it full time. I mean, Austin Rawlson is the full-time campaign manager of the group.
Mhm.
But I do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
I'm definitely not opposed to managing campaigns if circumstances are right, but I don't do it as a full-on business.
No.
Wi-Fi is the Youth Federalist Initiative is a full-on business that I'm committed to right now.
Mhm.
Interesting. And so how many campaigns have you managed?
So I've managed 2 in the past cycle, and then I've consulted with 5 or 6 since I got started doing politics back in 2018 once I got right out of high school.
Interesting. Are you any good?
I would say so. I mean, I'm obviously biased, so
Right. Is he any good?
He has a primary victory under his belt,
Yep.
and then for the general, though, not so much.
well,
but that was rough.
I was running House District 3. That's Daphne Michaels and Janae in the Colorado House of Representatives.
Yeah.
She's definitely one of the bigger fish.
Mm.
But I will say, given the circumstances where the national environment was against us as Republicans,
Sure.
and just various inter-party politics that
Right.
inhibited us, we were I believe House District 30 in Adams County was the only race to have a swing to the right.
Mhm.
Right. So you
No.
have,
It wasn't because the campaign I managed did. too.
okay, so us too. But yeah, I forget the exact numbers, but in 2018, the Republican only got 41% of the votes.
Mm.
And in 2020, the campaign I was running got almost 44%.
Mhm.
So that was a market improvement. from year over year.
Interesting.
And the thing about politics is,
So you've
sometimes
been successful, given that this is an uphill battle.
yeah, it's an uphill battle, and the thing we have to realize is that sometimes you can't win outright, and sometimes you just have to acknowledge that we can't be throwing Hail Marys hoping it's going to land eventually. Politics is a very deliberative and patience-oriented process.
Mhm.
So, especially in a Democrat-leaning area like Adams County, we just have to be looking for continual pushes to the right, cycle after cycle, until we finally get over that 50% threshold.
So what do you think is the best approach to doing that? How can we get out there and win over independents, undecideds, and persuadable
Well,
lefties?
I mean, it starts by literally just talking to them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally that simple.
And also actually volunteering to be a candidate. I mean, if there's no candidate on the ballot, there's no way that we're going to be able to really make that forward momentum. That's the point of running candidates. That's the point of running people who are active and engaged. Going and volunteering, doing greet and meets and meet and greets, and bringing people to the table in a low hostility environment where they can talk to a candidate or where they can talk to an elected official of some sort is huge in moving the bar forward, especially when people are feeling disenfranchised or feeling like their voice isn't there. Another thing people forget about so often is to actually show up with their political party's meetings. All of our meetings are required to be open to the public, and specifically people who are within our own party. And so when we avoid doing that, when we don't go out there, your voice isn't going to be heard. You've disenfranchised yourself, and you can't incite change unless you're there to speak your opinion and you're there to incite that change.
So at the end of the day, I mean, everybody lives in an area that's represented by a county party or some political organization. Everyone lives in an area, or a vast majority of people live in an area where a Republican or conservative candidate is running. And if you don't, then there's definitely going to be one nearby that you can also help, because electing any Republican anywhere is going to help all of us.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's all out there, and all you have to do is one Google search.
So I'm going to let you guys take this question first, but I do have some thoughts on it. Casey says, what do you think is the best way to approach conversations with someone who may have an opposing view?
I start with open-ended questions every single time. And the reason why I like the open-ended question is, one, you're creating a low-stress environment for that person. And the other thing that you're doing is you're making them feel heard. Oftentimes, we have to let them have that step, and then we can utilize our guided questioning, or we can insert our own thoughts and ideals and hold them to the same standard. It keeps everybody diffused and in a place where they're going to feel valued and heard.
Yep, there's that. And the other thing is, another good strategy is to come in having the other person know that you're listening to them and that you aren't expecting them to listen to you. Like, especially if you're a candidate and say you're a Republican, you're talking to Democrats. I've talked to many Democrats while political canvassing, and I normally start with saying, like, hey, what are your concerns with the community? And they may say something about public safety. I want to make sure police are doing their job. I want to make sure police are funded and whatnot. And even though they're Democrats, I mean, I as a Republican and them as a Democrat both agree that we need to keep our police intact, and we have to resist radical ideas that the Democrats are saying about defunding or abolishing the police. So there, just by letting them talk and listening to them for a second, you can identify ways you can get through to say Democrat voters while still keeping your ideological integrity intact.
It also opens it up so that you can find the areas that you do share in common, because Democrats and Republicans do have a remarkable amount of things that we share in common: beliefs, concerns, and motivations. We just come to a different approach in how we think that those should be solved, issues should be solved, but also in how we communicate those ideas. And so it really opens us up, especially as conservatives, to being able to hear the perspectives, which is something that the Democrats really need in order to feel valued and heard. But then it also gives us a chance to hold them accountable to their own philosophies.
So I'm trying to open up some old notes that I took on the very first episode of the Liberty Revolt. And this episode was about how to debate and when to debate politics. And I came down to a couple conclusions. Number one, the first thing you need to determine is it worth your while? Number one, do you know what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Number two, what is the context of this conversation? So if you are having a conversation one-on-one with a friend who disagrees, well, then the object of that debate is to actually win them over. It's to persuade them, which is much different than if you are in front of an audience and you are debating, say, a liberal. What you want to do in the context of in front of an audience is you're trying to speak to the audience. You're not trying to win over the person you're talking to. You're actually trying to make that person look as morally deficient as possible. And I say morally deficient on purpose, because what you need to do is speak in moral terms, because I'm into the stuff. But if someone starts talking to me about their 12-point tax plan, right?
It's
Even
boring.
my eyes glaze over.
Who cares?
People resonate to moral arguments. They're looking for policy positions and candidates who they believe have their best interest at heart. They would much rather vote for a nice guy who's incompetent than vote for a competent Darth Vader.
Well, hence the Joe Biden presidency.
Right.
Right. The way I see it is the vast majority of the population, I would venture to say 80% or more, don't care about politics at all. They don't study policy.
Nope.
They don't study their candidates. All they do is they pick up sound bites and they make a moral judgment call. Is this a nice person who has my best interest at heart that I can trust? And they base their opinion off that. So all of my arguments I base on trying to make a moral case for my policy positions. And I cater my debate depending on who the audience is and what the objective is, the debate. If it's my boss, my employer, probably not going to debate them.
No.
Right?
There's no winning in that.
If it's my wife, I shouldn't. I often
Yeah,
do,
you probably
but I
shouldn't have that right, sir.
but I shouldn't debate her, right? And I should certainly not approach it with the same strategies as I say you should approach it if you are arguing with somebody in front of an audience. So those are just a couple key takeaway things. I have actually managed to persuade a good handful of my lefty friends into realizing they are actually libertarians, because libertarians and progressives often have the very same problems they're concerned about, but polar opposite policy proposals.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty similar socially.
Right. So that they'll both identify the same problems, but it's the progressives that want to say more government, and it's the libertarians that want to say get the government out of here, it's corrupting everything.
Yes.
And so I've actually found that when I am arguing with progressives, friends of mine that I'm genuinely interested in reshaping their perspective, what I'll do is I'll find a common issue and I'll think of this persuasive strategy in a long-term format. So my goal is not to get them to say, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump or I'm a free market capitalist libertarian in that conversation. My goal for that conversation is get them to move an inch my way, get them to be sympathetic to my side of the argument, and then establish trust. So focusing on finding a common problem, a common enemy, and then making a strong moral policy case for that, and then leaving the door open for future conversations by focusing on establishing trust and a friendship with that person. And then over the course of a summer, and I've done this, I have turned someone who was literally believed that anyone who is not a progressive is a bigoted, racist warmonger who hates the poor, and got them to vote for Trump by the end of Trump's campaign season. just because I continually went over there to their house and slowly made a moral case for
Mhm.
conservative ideas,
Right.
and made proposed moral conservative solutions to left-wing problems.
Well, and it's funny that you would explain it that way, because that's how the communists work.
Mhm.
That's how they take over everything, is exactly the way you were talking about. The problems that we're seeing right now in terms of leftist issues were developed over time, and that plan was initiated back in the 1970s, the early 1970s. And then what we got out of that was we got the different types of organizations that deal with the environment and with health, and how animals are treated became more of an issue. That all started to expand and enhance. That was all part of the Communist Party's agenda, and they planned to plant people within the Democrat Party
Mhm.
because they were more sympathetic to communist ideals than Republicans were. And so over time, now we have people like AOC.
Yeah, but there's nothing stopping us from doing the exact same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, we absolutely should be
Mhm.
doing
That's what we're
the
doing.
exact same thing.
That's
So,
what
hey
us that are
guys,
doing, at
if you're
least.
watching, let us know in the comment section. Have you effectively managed to persuade anyone in your personal lives? Is there anyone that you feel like you have been able to effectively reach out, and how did you approach that conversation, and what do you think made that approach successful? Because this is really what fighting is. We often struggle, particularly the conservative party, to figure out, what does fighting mean. Donald Trump got elected under the impression that a lot of people had, that he represented someone who was willing to fight, and willing to fight hard, because it's probably the most common complaint from Republican voters, is that their politicians don't fight on their behalf.
Mhm.
They get elected, and then perhaps they have they pass a tax plan, a tax cut, and that's it. They don't do anything
Yeah.
else, right? We the first 2 years of Trump, we had all three branches.
Yep.
And what did we do? We did essentially nothing.
Tax Cuts and Jobs
Yeah.
Act.
Tax Cuts and Jobs
Nothing
Act.
else significant.
And Joe Biden has been in for 100 days, and he has done a lot, right? So
Well, from the
I feel
executive
like,
side.
well, I feel like conservatives have a legitimate reason to feel like their politicians are fighting. But what does fighting really mean? Well, in a democratic republic where elections are won by votes, fighting needs to translate into actually persuading people
Mhm.
to vote for you. Megan says yes, she has actually reached a few people in her life,
That's good.
and it's exciting to see
Whoop, whoop.
people actually open their eyes. Megan, we would love to hear more about how you approached those conversations, where it started and where it led to. And
Mhm.
we thank you sincerely for engaging in politics and taking on that form of activism, for lack of a better term. It really does make a difference. So, hey, you are Patriot of the Day, Megan. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We sure do appreciate it. So speaking of persuading people and fighting in politics, you guys explain the advanced candidate training course. Some of the people watching this live stream will have heard that before, because I reached out to you guys and said, hey guys, give me a honest assessment of my skills, answer this questionnaire for me. And Casey actually did fill out the questionnaire and give me some feedback. So that was very helpful. Casey, thank you so much, man. Sure do appreciate. But guys, tell the audience again, now that the viewership has grown a little bit since the beginning of the stream, what this is.
Yeah, definitely. So, I always say that, before we can think about, what policies we're going to pass and what we're going to do in the legislature, we have to find a way to get enough people there to begin with. Right? It seems common sense, but it's actually pretty overlooked from my experience. So the Advanced Candidate Training is a program created by the Youth Federalist Initiative, which is myself, Kavika, and Austin Ralston, who's a co-founder, who's not here. And we basically just get as many conservative and Republican candidates or potential candidates who want to run for office from around the states, and we just sit them down and take them through a campaign, and we show them exactly what it takes to run a campaign, and moreover to run a successful campaign. So by the time we're done with it, and by the time we have enough people, we can just contact them and say, hey, do you want to run for this? Do you want to run for this? And the idea is that, soon we have, a team of people, or more than a team, teams of people who know exactly what they do, who know their principles, and know how to actually be successful in advancing these principles in governments.
Mm-hmm.
But the first step is getting there. So that's what we focus on.
And it's really your experience is going to be different depending on which of the positions you're going to operate within. Whether you're a treasurer who has to make reports, or whether you're a campaign manager who's really leading the charge on how you're going to canvass, how you're going to operate with your messaging and making the candidate's vision and mission and beliefs shine, or whether you're the candidate who's actually running. The idea within this program is that we're teaching you theory, and then you're applying it within a safe environment where you can practice your skills. You can try things out. You can try out a slander campaign. You can try out a campaign where you are being passive and peaceful. You can try out a large variety of methods to approach a campaign in an environment that's cloistered off, so that your political opponents in the future don't have content that they can start attacking you with from the program. And what's nice is it's 9 weeks, which makes it the shortest campaign training program that still covers the ground level work that you have to do as a candidate or a campaign manager.
Yeah.
And
the next shortest one is 6 months.
Right.
Half a year.
Exactly. And it's also one of the cheapest ones as well that's out there.
Right on. So I have been taking the advanced candidate training course.
Yep. How's that been?
Tell us about
It's been very, very exciting. Learning a lot. It's very easy for people on the outside to knock their political candidates or the political parties without really understanding any of the actual work that goes into putting on a campaign, becoming a candidate, and being successful in politics. And this really is foundational. So it's great what you guys are doing. And I think that people who are coming out of this class are going to be drastically more equipped to effectively run their campaigns. So you've broken people off into teams, and these teams have determined who they want to fulfill different roles within these mock elections that you were talking about. And I have been determined to fit basically only into the role of candidate.
Well, that's not a bad thing.
It's not.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if I would ever want to actually run for office. I'd consider it. If it ever got so bad, I would consider. I would never want to rule it out completely. But it doesn't sound like a fun job, right? Because I know what I know what I do on the radio, and it is bash candidates hard as often as possible, and as hard as possible. And I know the kind of fervor that would be directed in my direction if I were to become a candidate, and if I were to have any success. It wouldn't be nearly as fun as simply trash talking on the radio. So,
well, but if you won an election, then you can trash talk on city council or wherever you are.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's a step up.
Well,
yeah, I could do both.
Well, and there are fun components to it, but do realize politics is a blood sport. They don't spare your feelings. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care who you are. They don't care who you've known. They just care, are you going to push your agenda, your beliefs, your policies, your ideas, and are you going to be effective at doing that? And sometimes the most effective politicians are the ones that you don't really hear about, unfortunately, because, I mean, let's face it, a lot of them are really, really boring.
Yeah.
Right,
but
right.
Well, that's
But it's a
good
lot of
thing
those,
in
a
some
lot of those
instances.
foreign guys are successfully moving the ball down the field.
yes,
But
Yeah.
those aren't the plays that get the standing ovations
No.
and the media plays.
Yeah.
It's the bold new agenda that
Yes.
gets
Yeah.
all of the attention. Robert Stanley says, any good Colorado peeps upcoming that we should be aware of?
Ooh.
As in, like, people running for like statewide office, or
Mhm.
Well, for U.S. Senate, I'm not aware of anyone right now, but for Colorado governor,
Mhm.
you do have Greg Lopez.
He's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I invite everyone to check out Greg Lopez
I'm gonna look him
for
up
governor
right now.
2022.
Mhm.
He is definitely my personal favorite to not only be the Republican nominee, but to win the whole thing.
Mhm.
You know, Greg's been the only guy since 2018 who's been out actually talking to Republicans across the state and actually talking to the, stakeholders in our state
Mhm.
and explain to them, why it's going to be disastrous to have Jared Polis in for the next 4 years,
Yep.
and just actually making a conservative case and being a real fighter like Bucky was talking about, where he lays out the issues and tries to elicit a moral response from people who may not be sympathetic to Republicans or who just may vote Democrat by default.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So Greg's been the only guy
That you
who's
feel
been
has
going to
been
those
actually
stakeholders,
persuasive.
who's been going to those communities who aren't traditionally Republican and, fighting and, morally persuading people. He's the only one I've seen do that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we're still a year out, so other candidates have yet to be seen. But
Yeah.
I'm definitely on the Greg Lopez train.
Yeah, and Lopez has also shown a willingness to go across the aisle as well. So
Mhm.
he's willing to go into the lion's den, get torn apart, and people respect him for that. And I mean, what's more, he's bilingual. So his parents came here from Mexico. Absolutely a wonderful man. If you ever get a chance to just talk to him, he's kind of like I don't know. I guess he's kind of got this John Wooden vibe about him, where it feels very homely when you're
Mhm.
talking to him. But man, that guy ain't gonna
He's
take
authentic.
nobody's garbage.
So I mean, yeah, the Colorado governor's race is a big one. Other than that, the Colorado State Senate, assuming we don't get the governorship, then one way to put a check on Polis is to take back the state Senate.
Yeah.
Right now, Republicans are 5 seats down. That means we have to have a net gain of 3 seats this time up.
Mhm.
And speaking from an Adams County perspective, I mean, it also depends on how redistricting is going to go. But for all intents and purposes, from what we know now, Senate District 24 is going to be one of the top swing districts.
Mhm.
In 2018, Beth Martinez-Humenick, a Republican incumbent, who was the sole senator who kept the Republican majority, lost to Faith Winter. So Republicans are definitely going to be trying to get that seat back.
Mm.
Mhm.
So Senate District 24 is one race I would definitely watch and throw your support behind.
Mhm.
As for the 2 other swing seats for the Senate, I'm not exactly sure right now. I'm gonna have to talk to the state party and other strategists to see what they're thinking.
Yeah, and we're gonna have some fun in that position, fighting to make something happen there. Especially with Kevin Priola leaving. Hey, by the way, we've got a nice little
So it looks
opening
like,
there.
not to cut you guys off, it looks like I'm looking at the Ballotpedia and I'm screen sharing the Ballotpedia
Mhm.
profile of Greg Lopez here. It looks like he got 3rd place
Yep.
last time in the primary
That
with
would be
only
true.
13%
Mm-hmm.
of the vote. Walker Stapleton outperformed him by a lot. And Republicans only got 42% of the vote. Jared Polis won by
Yep.
more, or by slightly less than, 300,000
Mm-hmm.
votes.
Mhm.
Do you think the Republicans have a significant chance of turning Colorado around?
I think the only place we can go from here is up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that being said, Greg Lopez has not left the campaign trail, and he's still been out there. The other thing to note with those numbers is that Greg Lopez only paid approximately 13 cents per vote that he received, versus his opponents like Stapleton, who had the entire state party backing him, and they weren't even hearing
the whole establishment.
Nobody was putting any money into
he was paying upwards of $1 per vote. Stapleton was
sometimes $8 a vote in order to win that. And so there's a huge difference between the two, because you're dealing with a hard establishment guy and then a political outsider who jumped in. Now, that political outsider, though, put up a greater showing than anybody thought that he was going to do. And now he's the only one who's actually in the trenches, still fighting out of the three.
And looking forward into 2022, you're going to have a much stronger grassroots and outsider influence led by people like Greg Lopez. And as far as the general election results, Stapleton was a weak gubernatorial candidate for a variety of reasons. That's a whole nother discussion in itself. But he was a weak candidate, and Lopez does not have the same shortfalls as Stapleton. And this was compounded with very adversarial national environment to Republicans in 2018, because this was Trump's first midterm, and historically, the first midterms to the party of the incumbent presidents are almost always unfavorable to that party. In fact, I think since the 1800s, the party of the president in their first midterm has only maintained the House of Representatives once or 3 times or whatever. My point is that's a very low percentage, and that the ties are always against the incumbent party. So 2018 was no exception.
You think 2022 will be a stronger year?
It'll be a strong year for Republicans, because now we have an incumbent Democrat president, and all the dirt is on the Democrats for what they're doing or what they're not doing or whatever.
Right.
The ball is very much in the Republican courts, and everyone from the RNC down to the county parties are looking to exploit that any way we can.
So, there seems to be a large percentage of the Republican Party that considers themselves libertarian.
Okay.
So, some people say that a lot of conservatives are just scared of the social backlash, and it's safer to come out as a libertarian.
I've seen that firsthand, actually.
And a lot of people just feel like they are genuinely libertarians, and there's no way they could vote for the left, but they don't want to throw away their vote either. And I of course am a strong proponent of ranked choice voting and kind of electoral reform in that sense. But what do you guys think of the interesting relationship between libertarians and conservatives? Obviously, if more libertarians had voted for Trump, that would have completely changed this last election. So where do you guys stand as far as your personal feelings of libertarianism versus republicanism, and why do you take that stance?
Well, I mean, from a pure electoral perspective, at least in Colorado, libertarians played a completely minuscule part in the grand results. They played no spoiler. They weren't really a force to be reckoned with just by pure vote numbers. Compared to nearly double that in 2016. So I'm not too concerned about how libertarians, like the pure libertarians, are going to play into Republican politics in 2022, because odds are there won't be a strong libertarian presence. But nationally, and play in like other swing states where there is a strong libertarian presence, a lot of them have been criticized for playing the spoiler to the Republican candidates, and that if the libertarians just vote for the Republicans, it would have avoided a Democrat from being elected. However, I'm personally skeptical of that. From talking to a lot of libertarians, a lot of them are a lot more ideologically diverse, and a lot more ideologically diverse than Republicans take them for. A lot of Republicans just see, okay, they want like government deregulation, they're for the Second Amendment, they're like hardcore Republicans, and they should just vote for Republicans. But when you talk to a lot of them about social issues, a lot of them are pro-choice, a lot of them are pro-feminism, a lot of them are pro-drug legalization, and just lockstep with the progressive left. So many of them, don't vote just for economic reasons. In fact, many of them, at least from my experience, take their social issues as precedents as to whether they vote. And obviously, when they vote for social issues, they vote more along the lines of Democrats. So the Libertarian
Right.
Party is a lot more complicated than Republicans give credence to.
Mhm.
But I also, for that reason, don't use the Libertarian Party as a scapegoat for whenever Republicans lose. Because there's 9 times out of 10, there's 20 different and better reasons why Republicans lost than Libertarians not voting for Republicans.
Interesting. Do you consider yourself Republican, Libertarian, or kind of in the middle?
I consider myself heavily Republican.
Why?
Well, as I briefly explained, a lot of the libertarian philosophy tends to lean very left on social issues. You know, I look at my beliefs. For example, I'm heavily pro-life, and I believe the government should do everything in its power to restrict and eventually abolish abortion. Libertarians simply don't believe that. They believe in small government giving women choices and giving people choices to do whatever they want, so long as it doesn't harm others. So I have a fundamental disagreement there. I think drugs should be illegal. Another fundamental disagreement. I think free trade should be limited strategically. That's why I support tariffs. That's why I support protectionism. That's why I support strategically using unions to make sure that manufacturing in the middle class is healthy. Libertarians don't. They're completely free trade, no exceptions.
Right.
And I can go on, but those are just 3 very stark ideological differences I have.
So on matters of social issues, on matters of international trade, and on matters of national security, you consider the kind of Republican brand of protectionism a little more realistic
Than unabated free trade that libertarians want, definitely.
Kavika.
All right. So I do tend to call myself a Republican, just going to say that right out, and more of a constitutional conservative within the very broad wing of the Republican Party, because let's face it, we're the party that does believe in free thought and ideas. You're not going to see that as much out of the Democrats. If you don't believe me, go read their 63-page platform. You're going to see exactly what I'm talking about, especially when you compare it to ours on the Republican side of things. As per libertarians, I'm totally cool with it. I think that it's fantastic that they have their ideas, their beliefs. I do believe that oftentimes when it comes to the hard issues that government really can control, that they are right in what they believe. So we do need to limit the government. We do need to take them out of the equation in most issues. I think the reason why I'm a pro-life believing person is because I believe that everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. End of story. That includes that unborn child. It was not their fault that they came into the world. And in the cases of rape, incest, there are plenty of adoption programs out there that will treat the situation as a surrogate situation, because there are families that want that. In fact, there are 22 in the Denver metro area alone. That doesn't include the number of adoption agencies that do that are private adoption organizations within the state of Colorado. Okay, and that's just here alone.
It looks like you're getting a lot of heart/care reactions to these statements right now.
Come on now.
Going on.
Did I offend any libertarians in the chat?
Yeah. What do you guys think in the chat? Where do you guys stand as far as conservative, Republican, libertarian, conservatarian, which is kind of where I find myself. I have never considered myself a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
I started out very progressive, and I kind of realized that I felt like I was being misled and manipulated by the powers that be into that progressive worldview, and I started to kind of branch out. But I never felt like I wanted to be associated with the Republicans. Now, part of this may be just the effectiveness of the left-wing media campaign that has existed my entire life, particularly in the cultural sphere, which is where I think political influence is actually the most impactful and where we need to be focusing our efforts. But I grew up listening to punk rock and heavy metal, and my favorite bands were like Rage Against the Machine,
Yeah, come on
and
now.
Slipknot.
Let's go. Come on. Keep them coming.
and
keep 'em coming.
and I liked Korn and Lamb of God, and I liked
Yeah, a few of those
System
are
of a Down.
literal commies.
Right?
Literal
Yeah.
commies.
Yeah,
listen
and so
to.
I kind of absorbed through the ether George Bush bad.
Yeah.
Republicans are racist,
Yes.
sexist, warmongers
Yes.
who hate the poor. And I do think that there are historical sins and discriminations that the Republican Party is guilty to, but I
Like
do
what?
not think like the resistance to gay marriage for a long time.
Oh, there's still a lot of resistance.
There's still a lot of resistance, but
Yeah.
you know where
that
stems
didn't
from.
go away.
Yeah, but I don't feel that way. I've never
Yeah.
felt like there should be any. I
Sure.
don't see why the
Sure,
government's
sure.
in the
Yeah.
business of
I mean,
marriage.
gay
at
marriage.
all.
One
Well-
more reason why I'm not a libertarian.
Let's be 100% frank on this here. David Horowitz talks about it in his book Dark Agenda.
Mm.
Why
David Horowitz is great.
Oh yeah, he's brilliant, right? Well, I love his stuff because he really paints a picture that's relatively balanced about what was going on. And the Dark Agenda, he addresses the gay LGBTQ plus community and what's going on there. And a lot of the riots that had happened in LA, for example, surrounding that were really incitements from that community. Yep. They were not created by the conservatives. The conservatives and the government itself, and in this case, I agree with them, we're pushing, look, your community is being completely and utterly infected with HIV. Use contraceptives. We don't care what you're doing. Do it in whatever you do in your own house is what you do. Whoever's in your bed, that's who's in your bed. I take that stance. That's what I think. That's an area where I'm going to align a little more with libertarians. I don't think we should even be touching marriage in terms of government entities. It's a religious function. It's a religious right, and it needs to be treated as such. It's protected. Marriage should be protected and warranted and kept going in that sense. But when we start legislating it, now we're placing churches and other entities into a position where they have to decide, am I going to be true to my God and what they command, or am I going to be beholden to my government official? And that's not an okay place to be. Instead, just get it out of the whole government sphere altogether. Government has no business telling us who we can take into our bedroom and who we're not. Or the way my mom would say it is, the government shouldn't be telling us who we're porking. Okay.
Sure. So maybe there is a little bit more context to the history of that relationship. But me personally, I like I say, I don't think the government should have any involvement whatsoever in people's sex lives and in marriage.
Sure.
I think that's up to the individual. I do think that we should value traditional marriages for the sake of raising and rearing children that I think is unique to traditional marriage in a way that perhaps you're not fulfilling some of those the same. Gosh, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I just think that kids do better when they have a mom and a dad.
They do.
Well, they do, and statistically they do too.
And I'm not saying at all. I mean, I would much rather see a kid adopted by a lesbian couple than a kid grow up in a government-run foster facility.
Well,
I think that there are much bigger problems in the world, and in any way, shape, or form, functional and intact is better than a lot of the alternatives that exist out there in the world. So if I have a friend who's gay and they adopt a kid, I am not going to act like they are doing that child a disservice in any way whatsoever. But I feel as far as the conservatives and the libertarians on some of these social issues, I actually find myself very sympathetic to a lot of the libertarian arguments. I feel like we need that element in our society, constantly pushing back on both of the established political parties at all times, because I think that inherently the government is a violent and oppressive entity, and that you do need this wing of libertarians constantly digging their heels in at all times, just for the sake of keeping that conversation going. Just like I think the best states in the country to live in are actually swing states. I wouldn't want to live in a Republican state or a Democrat state, because I think that if all you have to do in order to win political influence in a given territory is put the
right party.
Yeah, is put the right letter next to your name, you are no longer accountable to your constituents.
Yes.
And I think that is a much bigger problem than say one side's failing policies or the other side's failing policies.
Right, which is why democracies always fail. And we are a republic. That's in our Constitution. I'm going to leave it to you to go find the article in the section that's located in. I could tell you, but it's just so much more fun to make you go look for it.
Guys, does anyone know that? Where in our Constitution does it say that we are a democratic republic?
No, we're not a democratic.
That we're not.
We are a republic.
That we are a republic.
Yeah.
Gosh, Kurt, please do not be watching this live stream right.
Yeah. So there is a lot in that, but go find it. Go find out.
Leave it in the comment section, guys. Let us know.
The reason why we are a republic, Polybius outlined a very interesting observation when he went to study the Roman Empire. And while he was there, one of the things that he noticed about the success of the Roman Empire was that there was a mixture between the majority and the minority of people. There was a protection for the voice of the minority, and that there was also a clear dichotomy of how we had a hierarchical structure within the systems that governed the Roman Empire. And he said that really the countermeasure to keep government from constantly repeating itself, going from a democracy down into the mob rule, over to a totalitarian regime, over to a monarchy, then an aristocracy, oligarchy, and then back to a democracy again, was to form a republic where you have elements of all three interacting simultaneously, but you still protect the voice of the minority and give the minority the powers and abilities to push back against the majority when the majority is wrong, such as state-funded abortions. I mean, I'm okay with if you're going to go have an abortion, go have it, but don't do it on the taxpayer's dime. You know, should be a private decision in my.
Now, Evan looked like he cringed hard when you said that.
But
yeah, I did.
But I'm going to tell you that, like Evan, I am a pro-lifer. But I don't think that it should be the government's business to provide those abortions. If they're going to do it, people are going to find ways to do it. I'm a realist.
Well, I mean, I'll go a step further.
But I do also agree that it should be illegal if I had it my way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go a step further and say that's the government's business to not provide and prevent abortions.
Mm-hmm. And I can agree with him on that regard. But that's preventative. And I think that in the current political environment we're in, that we're going to be more successful at getting it privatized than we are getting it fully banned.
So you guys watching the live stream, what do you think? Abortion? Should we ban late-term abortion? Should we ban all abortion?
Absolutely.
Should we subsidize abortion?
Yeah, I mean, ban all abortion.
Ban all abortion, but there is.
What do you guys think of post-birth abortion? What do you guys think of Planned Parenthood?
You mean homicide?
No.
What do you guys think
post-birth abortion? You mean homicide?
What do you guys think of Planned Parenthood literally selling aborted baby tissue for profit and coercing young girls into getting abortions so that they can profit off that? What do you think? What do you guys think about Planned Parenthood secretly keeping babies alive outside of the womb that have been declared aborted for several weeks so that they can develop into more profitable tissue samples? What do you guys think? Leave it in the comment section. Planned Parenthood and abortion, your thoughts. Let us know.
I again, and just to set the record here, I do need to make it very clear. I am a strong pro-lifer. If we could ban it all, I'm 100% in. But I also understand that we have to do it in steps. We're not going to get a full ban right away.
The goal right now is to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is most likely about to happen.
Especially with the new science that's out there.
Oh, and just the new Supreme Court. It's the most pro-life court we've had in quite a while.
That's very true, too.
So my personal opinion here is, I think the pro-life argument is the right one. I think it really comes down to, do you think it is a life or not? I personally do think it's a life,
Yes.
because if we found a single-celled human embryo on Mars, all the scientific papers would correctly state human life
Yeah.
found on Mars. I think that is scientifically, factually true.
That is true.
And it's either a life or it's not. If it's a life, you can't kill it. If
Right.
it isn't a life, if it's a ball of snot, you can do whatever you want with it,
Right.
which is where the argument tends to lie. But, your genetic code
Is
was
completely
you
unique.
immediately at the point of conception. It's a
Yes.
unique piece of
Mhm.
identity. And all the other arguments as far as viability seem to have logical fallacies or failures in them, in
Mhm.
that there's a lot of people alive and walking, or adult people walking around the world, perhaps not walking, whatever, in the world today, that you could make the case that they are not viable. If someone is in a coma and requires 24/7 work on behalf of somebody else
Yeah.
to feed them, to hydrate them, to keep them alive, they're essentially in the same state that a fetus is.
Yeah.
And so, or should you be allowed to
Well,
walk up and stab that
yeah,
person?
according to pro-choicers, it's okay to kill that person.
Yes.
All right. What if you knew that person was going to reliably, say, wake up in 9 months, right? So there's a lot of problems with the pro-choice argument as far as the scientific basis for it. But I also feel that it is a downstream problem. That we have a lot of things we need to fix about our culture before we can even reasonably implement and enforce any kind of abortion regulations. That I don't know. It's tough. I think the pro-life argument is the correct one,
Yes.
but I've had a hard time actually making that a hill I'm willing to die on.
Right. And that's going to be a matter of philosophy and perspective that you're dealing with, and with the hard leftists, the communists, Marxists. Anybody with a Marxist influence is not going to perceive human beings as anything but another animal. And so once you get that into perspective, then you begin to realize how far of a fight you actually have with the pro-life. And so what I encourage you to do, if you're fighting for pro-life legislation and doing the good fight to ban it, start with the little bits. Start by getting late-term abortion banned in your area, or post-abortion if you're in New York. By golly, stop that. Okay. And then after that, then you move it into the second trimester and you slowly whittle it down. That's how the abortionists got what they wanted. And that's how we can get what we need to get.
All right. So guys, I want to play something for you guys. As far as we got on the topic of democracy, I have a 4-minute video here that says why Socrates hated democracy. And I would like to share that screen on the live stream, let you guys watch it in the live stream, and let me know where am I at here? Oh, yes. And let me know what you guys think about this video, and then potentially discuss it. If I can figure out how to do that really here. Share screen window. I have another window here. Where is it? It's a new window. So here we go. Guys watching this live stream now, give us a like, give us a comment, share this video, and what in the world is the Constitutional Party? And let us know in the comments section what you think of that. I'm going to share this window here and play this video. Hopefully you guys can hear it as well. Let me know in the live stream if you can hear this audio. Can you?
We used to
Oh. All right. Let me restart this. Apparently, I did not set it up so that people could hear the audio. So let me try this one more time. Share screen. Apparently, I did not set it up so that people could hear the audio. Perfect. Now I have it set up. So we were going to try this one more time, ladies and gents.
Still no sound.
Socrates was trying to get someone to see the flaws of democracy by comparing society to a chip. If you're going out to sea, who would you ideally want deciding who is in charge of the vessel? Just anyone, or people educated in the demands of seafaring? So why then, said Socrates, do we keep thinking that any old person should be fit to judge who should be the ruler of a country? Socrates' point was that voting in election was a skill, not a random intuition. And like any skill, it needs to be taught systematically to people. Letting the citizenry vote without an education is as irresponsible as putting them in charge of a trireme sailing through a storm. Socrates was to have firsthand catastrophic experience of the foolishness of voters. In 39 BC, the philosopher was put on trial on trumped-up charges of corrupting the youth of Athens. And the people weighed up the case and decided that he was guilty, and he was put to death by hemlock in a process which was for thinking people every bit as tragic as Jesus's condemnation has been for Christians. So he was not an elitist. He didn't believe that a narrow view should be the only ones that vote, but he insisted that only those who had thought about the issues rationally and deeply should be let near a vote. We have forgotten this distinction between an intellectual democracy and a democracy by birthright. We have given the vote to all without connecting it to wisdom. And Socrates knew exactly where that would lead, to a system the Greeks feared above all, demagoguery. Ancient Athens had a painful experience of demagogues. The louche figure of, I can't pronounce the name, a wealthy man who eroded the basic freedoms of Athens and helped push it to its disastrous military endeavors in Sicily. So he believed that there should be restrictions on voting, essentially. So I'm gonna pause that because I cannot keep up with narrating that video at the same time as operating this live stream. But Socrates, the Athenian philosopher, believed that there was a lot of flaws with democracy and letting just anyone vote because a lot of people are not in a position to vote responsibly. Mm-hmm. They don't understand the consequences of their vote, and they are going to fall victim to demagogues who would exploit their ignorance for personal power.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead and start on that one? Because he wanted us to react to it.
Oh, okay. I mean, everything the video said makes sense. And yeah, I think it also underpins the core difference between republicanism and democracy, in the sense that democracy is, in effect, mob rule. And it's also government by consent of the pure majority, meaning everyone can vote, everyone can have just as equal a say as another. But also doesn't consider the fact that Some people are just better oriented to vote. Some people have more of a stake in the civic process and just more of a stake in society. So naturally, with republicanism, we have to weigh those things to make sure that responsible people are voting so that they can really influence society, not to what the majority has to say, but to what the most skilled and the most, important people, for lack of a better word, people need, so that the core of society can still run, and that there still is representation for people who are out of that peripheral, and people who may not be as educated or as elites and whatnot. Those people still get a say, but it also makes sure that they can't simply ransack everyone else who's higher up on the ladder.
Right. It seems to me that the left is going to have tremendous traction, correctly pointing out that anything short of a pure democracy is, in a sense, voter suppression. And they're going to get a lot of traction on that. They're going to play that card hard, and they're going to force anyone who disagrees with them to rationalize why some form of voter discrimination should be legitimate, and does not necessarily disenfranchise society.
Like requiring that these are legal citizens of the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, you should at least have a stake in society.
Yes, you should have a stake.
I mean, that's one reason to discriminate against voters.
Yes.
Now, I've always felt, and there's a difference between discriminating and prejudice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that I like to point out is I discriminate against women, and what I mean by that is, I'm only sexually and intimately involved with one woman.
Yep.
That is my wife, and she appreciates that I'm discriminating in that sense. And it's it'd be better for society if more people did that, in my personal opinion, although I don't believe I should force my views on anyone. But not all discrimination is necessarily prejudice or a bad thing. You discriminate every time you decide that you're going to do one thing and not another thing.
Yeah.
You discriminate every time you decide that, do I want to have the chicken sandwich or the beef sandwich?
Yeah.
And you can choose chicken without being anti-beef.
Exactly.
But in my personal opinion, we should have some barriers to voting, reasonable barriers to voting. I believe that, yes, you should have to provide some form of legitimate ID.
Yeah.
I don't think it's unreasonable. I think if the left was serious about voter ID laws being racist, they would be campaigning to put better access to driver's licenses in communities that they run, by the way.
Yeah.
Then they would be saying that we should just throw out the integrity of our elections, which doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like the only reason they would be pursuing this is in pursuit of easier fraud.
Yeah.
And I do think that mail-in voting and automatic registration is a bad idea, because I do think it should require some level of personal effort and responsibility to exercise your voting privileges.
Yeah, fundamentally, you have to prove that you have a stake in society, which means you have to prove you're at least a resident of the country and that you reside in the area where the election and office is taking place for.
It should require a little bit more effort than commenting on a Facebook video. Which, by the way, guys, please comment on this Facebook video.
But also, as you said, you also have to show at least a bare amount of initiative, where you go through the trouble of registering to vote.
Yes.
Because that means, not only do you actually have a stake in society by living in that society, but you also care enough to just put forth your own time and efforts and, whatever else to find out how to vote and how to take place in that. Because by registering to vote, that means you are interested in, learning about candidates and learning how to best vote and contribute.
Right.
At least ideally. Automatic registration is something different, but
I just played a video about Socrates in ancient Athens. I will note that, one thing about ancient Athens is they only let property owners vote.
Yes.
And there was actually some writing behind this. And they said that frankly, so many of the population, it wasn't like today where you had washing machines and dishwashers
Right.
and then all of the, fast food and all these other convenient commodities that make our lives more efficient so that we can focus on intellectual pursuits. Back then, a lot of people spent their entire lives working in a field or
Yes.
raising children or out acting as a soldier or something, and they actually didn't have the access to the information to vote responsibly.
Yeah.
And they weren't doing so to necessarily disenfranchise workers or women or soldiers, but they were trying to make sure that the people voting had the information and the intellectual capacity to vote responsibly with the best interest of everyone at heart.
Well,
and obviously there's going to be a recipe for corruption there.
sure.
That's undeniable. So the problem we need to figure out is how do we maximally give people the opportunity to have a say whilst making sure that say has integrity to it and is actually in the best interest of the country.
Well, one of the things that I think right out is I would agree with the idea of actually having some kind of stake. A property owner, a person who's actually working a job, not a kid in college, is going to have a much different understanding and perspective on the world. And the reason for that is the person who's working, paying taxes, has to live underneath those ideals and are dealing with those things in real time in the world. And somebody who doesn't have that, somebody who isn't owning a piece of property or owning a home or working on owning that home, they're not going to take the same care or joy or love in the things that they have. But also at that time, many people would have to build their own. They would have to buy it. It's very similar to how Mexico's economy works, actually, in that they down there have a detestment. They don't like credit, period. So they pay for everything right out down there is a very common practice. Now, as time has been moving forward, they have become more progressive with their finances. And yes, the crediting system has become a thing down in Mexico. And that is a relatively recent thing. And the reason why their GDP is so low isn't because they don't necessarily have resources, which, yes, they're limited, but it's because nobody's taking credit because it's still a social taboo. It's still a social stigma to take credit down there. And so you have nothing to base your GDP numbers on because there's no debt or minimal debt.
Yeah. So going off of what Kavika said, as far as policy goes and as far as ensuring more responsible political representation in our voting system, the logical step would simply be to restrict suffrage. And based off what Kavika was saying, probably easiest way to do that is by age. Voting age used to be 21. It's since been lowered to 18 by the Eisenhower administration, I believe. But yeah, as far as a policy prescription, I would say we should raise the voting age at least
25.
back up to 21 and 25. There's a good argument for 25 because that's
unless you're in the military.
But yeah, possible. But there's a good argument for 25 because that's when the brain is fully developed. That's when, in theory, you can make the most rational decisions.
Yes.
But also from a socioeconomic perspective, 25 is when most people are either settled down, about to get settled down, or in the process of actually participating in the economy, not as a student who's taking debt and living off of their parents' money, but as a producer.
Yes.
So anything from 21 to 25, I think, is where we should raise it to increase, more responsibility in the voting system and who's voting.
And to give some credence with that, or to give some pushback a little bit, I think if you're old enough to die for your country, you're old enough to make decisions for it. But I'm going to place in a caveat with what Evan was saying, because I don't mind the idea of raising it back up to 21. In fact, I haven't heard that proposal in a long time.
Well, it's time to revive it.
Yeah, but if somebody is active duty military and they're 18, I have no problem with them voting. Or
I mean,
putting-
perhaps we
I
should
mean,
raise
that's
the
an
age of
exception.
military duty to 21 as well.
Yeah,
I mean, I know that 18-year-olds are in some ways can be trained more effectively to be
Yeah.
more lethal and effective soldiers.
I mean, to me, 21
But,
makes sense because
I've also been 18 and I've also talked to 18-year-olds, and it feels a little they don't necessarily know
Yeah.
everything they're up to.
Yeah.
and I mean, it's 21 for what, smoking, drinking, various other things. You may as well just make it consistent across the board.
Mhm.
I can see the argument for that, and that eliminates the need for an exception to have you can vote if you join the military before 21. But
Right.
but I mean, I won't be opposed to that exception though.
I mean, I used to, when I was 17, I thought 18 was fully adult. And
No,
in the recent past, I have employed 18-year-olds, spent time with 18-year-olds, and realized that these are children.
yeah,
Yes.
These are children. And I personally think that, in military service, perhaps waiting till someone's a little more cognitively developed would be a good idea. But also, in the context of voting, it seems to me that you should have a little bit of more real world experience outside of high school.
Yes.
Perhaps being responsible for yourself at the bare minimum,
mhm,
perhaps having paid taxes at some point, or have even been responsible for another person
Right.
at some point, would make you, would changes your perspective, and would make
Yeah.
you vote in a way that I think would be more responsible. I don't fall for this idea that we should be getting as many people as possible to participate in voting,
no,
and everything shy of that is synonymous with vicious prejudice voter suppression.
Right.
I think that's a little bit ridiculous, and a lot of it ridiculous in some ways. And it's an interesting conversation. I think we should be having the conversation of raising
Yeah.
the voting age, because as long as we have our friends on the left talking about lowering it, we should be talking about raising it to counter that argument, as a form of digging our heels in. Because if the conversation is, should we lower it or should we keep it 18, then the
Raise
middle
it.
ground is 17,
Yeah.
which is a step in the wrong direction.
and I mean, 18 is
So,
too low,
18 's
let
too
alone
low.
17.
Yeah.
Guys, we have been live streaming for an hour and 22 minutes.
Oh, not bad.
Super Nandio is watching on YouTube. He says, I think if abortions was an expense that would cost, and I think he means out of pocket, then people would be a lot more cautious to avoid pregnancy. Do you guys
Yeah.
think that this is a legitimate contention?
I completely agree.
Yeah, I
You
would.
think we should have a little bit more personal cost to that decision?
I
Well,
think
it
that
should-
be 100% of the cost.
I mean, this is assuming that abortions are legal. I mean, I don't think this is a contention worth talking about, because I want to make abortions completely illegal
Yeah.
to begin with. So I don't really want to talk about what we can do while abortions are legal. Right. My goal is to eliminate them altogether.
And I would say that yes, if we were to make the people who are seeking an abortion pay the full cost of it, that yes, they would think twice about whether or not they're going to be promiscuous. And boys or girls, if there are any girls watching, if he ain't willing to put a ring on you,
Mhm.
you probably ain't gonna be willing to be there for that
Yeah,
kid.
well-
So I mean, let's just be responsible. Be responsible about it. Go out there. Don't use abortion. Don't use murder as a means of controlling birth.
Yeah.
It's better to just not let the guy in you
Well,
at all.
and again, the ultimate inhibitor for getting in the ultimate inhibitor for promiscuity is just making abortion illegal, because that way you legally have to, assess and live with your consequences.
But it still happens though in other
Well,
countries where abortions
it-
are illegal.
I mean,
right?
yeah,
it's-
people break the law all the time. That's
Yes.
not the point of having laws is predominantly to dissuade people from breaking the law, but there's
Right.
still going to be a small percent of people who do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's one thing to consider. For example, going back to Mexico, there are places where prostitution is fully legal there. However, nationally, abortion is illegal there. And so you do see a lot of promiscuity that does still come out, especially when you're talking about a rebellious teenager. I mean, come on now. Who here has not at least thought about stealing something just because it was illegal when they were a teenager? That's what those teenage years are about, right? And
yeah, hopefully Kurt isn't watching, but I got in trouble a great handful of times for things of that nature when I was a teenager. I was a troublemaker. I was a hoodlum.
Yes.
But it also puts me in a position to where I can reach out to people and understand that mindset and hopefully help reform that mindset in a way that perhaps someone who hasn't struggled with going down the wrong path before could address. I think I could have a much more nuanced and informed perception and response to those kinds of issues plaguing our society.
Yep.
So, guys, final questions in the live stream. We are going to invite you to ask these political experts of the political process, anything, and perhaps touch on the surprising convenience of putting together a recall effort. That is something
I
that
wouldn't
think
say
we
it's
haven't
convenience.
and it's more convenient than I thought because I didn't even consider the option.
It's still hard.
It is still a hard process because there's a lot of hoops you've got to go through. Certain age colors are permissible. If a signature or a name is illegible or any information is illegible on there, it automatically gets thrown out. So there are a lot of nuance.
And in the case of Westminster, the clerk can at least try to invalidate like half the pages because he can claim that they were signing for misleading reasons.
Yes.
I mean, that's one thing, but my point is that the clerk has a substantial amount of authority to dismiss signatures and pages for his own specific reasons. And that's going to require a lengthy lawsuit to clear up if it turns out that he was doing it erroneously.
Interesting.
And the reason why the recall effort in Westminster did succeed was because of a lawyer. I mean, let's be honest, because they were throwing it out over things like, oh, it wasn't stapled on the correct side of the page, which of course the judge thought was a joke.
Yeah.
But I mean,
once you get your petition in, say there's enough signatures, that doesn't automatically remove the recalled official. All that does is it creates a special election where the ballot first asks a question: shall so-and-so be recalled? The voter has to mark yes. And if the voter marks yes, then they have to choose a candidate to replace that person. So it's not automatic once those signatures do go through. People still have to actually run for the office, and they can only get in assuming a majority of voters, meaning not the people who signed the petition, but all voters in the area agree that person should be recalled. And odds are, since, at most you only have 30% of voters in any given election thinking it should be recalled, that's still another 20% of voters who didn't sign the petition that you have to convince. And that's even before you get to talking about yourself as a candidate to replace that person. So that's the devil in the details. And also, there's nothing stopping there's nothing stopping the guy who's being recalled from simply resigning before the special election can happen, because they can just resign, and that means that the current board just has to appoint a new person, and there's no recall happening, and there's no chance for the candidates that were working for this recall election to actually run and get in. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things that the recallee can do to just avoid the recall and avoid accountability and keep their people in. So recalls are definitely harder than it first seems, and they also aren't nearly as politically expedient as they first seem or what people make them out to be. What I always say is that, ideally, we don't have to recall people because we just get the people we want in to begin with. So that's really where it all starts. If you want good representation, you just work to get good people in, good conservatives and Republicans in, so you don't have to try and force a Democrat to backtrack through a recall.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, final question before we end the live stream. Everybody, thank you for hanging out. We sure do appreciate it. Please consider liking this video, commenting on this video, sharing this video, and following the Liberty Revolt page. It really does help us. Alternatively, you could unfollow, unsubscribe, don't hit the bell, don't get the notifications, and dox me on Antifa blog forums. It really
Sounds fun.
Helps the competitors. Guys, final question. I'm going to put the spotlight right on you. LR says, is there effective ways to stymie a political candidate's campaign, i.e., bog it down with hoops to jump through, paperwork, and wastes of resources? Say there was a city council race and you were trying to stymie a particular candidate's campaign efforts. What would you guys recommend doing to keep them wasting their time and money as effectively as possible?
Well, I mean, on the note of recalls, I gave quite a few good ways that you could hang up a recall effort. A lot of candidates, at least in Westminster, are running on a recall effort. So all you have to do is say that the signatures are invalid or that encourage people to just resign, avoid the recall altogether. There's a lot of ways to do that, but just for a regular election, one way to do it is look to see if they have any campaign finance or other canvassing violations. So by that, I mean, it could be something as simple as hiring somebody to follow the candidate or their volunteers around when they knock doors and see if they're putting campaign literature in the mailbox or somewhere else they aren't supposed to be. Because if they are putting stuff in the mailbox, that's actually a pretty sizable fine. Right, you can't do that. Only actual mail can be in the mailbox. Mm-hmm. So you can find them. You can scour their campaign finance reports on Colorado Tracer, which is the place where candidates have to report their info, and see maybe something that wasn't properly reported, like an itemized donation, $20 or above, doesn't have the name and other info of the person who gave it. That's a campaign finance complaint. You can look for late filings. Mm-hmm. Secretary of State tends to excuse a lot of late filings. But if you're paying attention, you can say, well, this person's late filing. I'm going to file a campaign finance complaint. So there's stuff like that you can really dig into and look for the loopholes in the campaign finance system. Other than that, a good way is to hire trolls to go to their Facebook pages and other campaign digital media and just comment nonsense and just try and get them off message, try and fluster the candidate to where they're responding defensively. And ultimately, the goal there is just try and get them in a hole where they make a contradiction or they say something unwise out of impulse that you can then make an ad campaign on. And you can also just be generally aggressive. Make the narrative, force them to respond to everything, make sure they aren't responding or making their own narrative.
If you're explaining, you're losing.
Exactly.
Yes.
As a campaigner, you always have to be on the offense. There's no question about it. If you find yourself on the defense, your goal is to get yourself out of the defense as quickly as possible.
Yes.
But there's various shady things you can do, or at least things that people don't think about to get them on the defense that transcends conventional, well, this person's wrong about this policy points type stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and going outside of policy is going to be where you're going to find everything that you need to get the person, unless they've done something horrible. Here's a guy, Tay Anderson, for example. Oh my goodness. 62 sexual assault charges or accusations from illegal immigrants, nonetheless. Tay Anderson is one of the sitting school board members for the Denver Public Schools School Board currently, and has been a major poster child from all of the left-wing groups. The Bernie-crats actually just revoked their endorsement of him because of this. Okay, but if you can find a scandal like that and blow it up to an epic proportion, that's going to do a tremendous amount
Yeah.
of damage to that candidate. And I can tell you right now, it's going to be pretty easy to find them if you start looking within their own
And just imagine if all this stuff against Tay Anderson came out in 2019 when he was running for school board.
would have crushed him.
Yeah, it doesn't take a campaign strategist to realize that that wouldn't have been good for him.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, he's up for re-election in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming he's even on the board by then, which I doubt, assuming he's on the board, you just imagine how easy it would be for anyone to just steamroll and bully the hell out of him based on what he's done, and how easy it would be to win that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because you just have to prove that you're not a sleazebag. I mean,
Literally, I mean, the bar is so low for that race. Literally just prove you haven't molested 62 illegal immigrants.
but to get out of that,
Yikes.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
Devastation.
it's always the little things that wind up creating the problems, not the big things.
Yeah.
And we oftentimes think of the big things. Now, there are ways, like if you can support your candidate that you're pro by supplying an advertising campaign for them. That's going to require the opponent to come up with the funds in order to launch a counter campaign against that.
Yeah.
And so there are some powerful tools that you can utilize. Media, you can utilize social media in order to drive your cause forward. On Facebook, for crying out loud, it's so easy to drop $20 and hit a large portion of people. It doesn't take much money to nail social media advertising. If you can run an effective slander campaign, you've put together something that's professional, truthful, and scathing, put that out, and then they're going to have to defend themselves against it, especially if you can prove that it's happened multiple times
A pattern.
over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Not a slip up, a pattern.
you're right. You have to find a pattern. And if you can find that pattern, now you've got a scathing review that they're going to be spending a tremendous amount of time and energy on. You know, that's why we need to get somebody to go against Chaz Tedesco.
Yeah.
That guy's got a pattern
He's
of DUIs,
he's a commissioner.
domestic
He's a
violence,
commissioner
and-
in Adams County.
Yeah. And that guy has a pattern of DUIs and domestic violence. I mean, let's face it, somebody, if they can drudge up the money to be able to put that forward, that guy's going to have a pretty hard time dealing with that.
Right on, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Liberty Revolt. I sure do appreciate having you here. And I hope you guys have a great day. How can people find the advanced candidate training course if it's something they're interested? How can somebody find and support the Youth Federalist Initiative?
So right now, we're in the process of setting up a second session for the Tier 1 basic class for the advanced candidate training, which is the one you're taking now.
Mhm.
So currently, we don't have a link up on the website, but we do have a website where other stuff like our podcasts and other events are on. We have our podcast. We also have our Patreon, which if you want to subscribe and help fund and sponsor participants for these classes, you're going to find our link there. So our website is the letter YFI1776.com.
Mm-hmm.
So just go to that and you're going to find everything there. And that's where we're going to update with future classes and events. And yeah, Bucky's
Right
going
on.
to type that in the chats.
Yep, www.yfi1776.com. I'm going to type that in one more time. YFI1776.com.
And we're also, if you're looking to listen to the commentary from all three of us, crazies, you can support us on our Patreon page. It's www.patreon.com/YFI1776. And you can support us, and we'll also be putting out some other content where you get to hear us fight, brawl, whatever you want to say, from three different perspectives within the Republican Party because
Patreon.com
huge.
/YFI1776.
Yep.
Okay.
And of course, tomorrow at 4 p.m., we're going to be starting our first radio broadcast with our show
That's
titled
right.
The Red Rift.
On 1360 KHNC. Come on, somebody.
You guys heard it right here. 1360 KHNC. Guys, check out our CBD products. 1360khnc.com/shop. It helps us. It helps you. Hey, and we guys, we hope you have the most wonderful day.
See ya.